Hey there, come closer to the fire and listen softly. After the flood, the first thing the old clay seems to remember is not thunder, not panic, not even the boat. It is hunger. The gods came back to a quiet world, and the smoke of one small sacrifice was the only sign that humanity had not completely vanished. That is where our story begins. A man opens a window. His name is Ziusudra. The rain has ended. The waters have loosened their grip on the earth. Around him, the world is not dead exactly, but it is emptied, washed, stunned into silence. Cities that had once breathed with markets, ovens, cattle, arguments, songs, and temple drums now lie beneath mud and broken reeds. The canals are choked. The walls have softened. The shrines are hollow. The old streets have become lines hidden under brown water. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into ancient darkness, leave a like and subscribe so the fire can stay lit for the next story. Now let the room settle around you. Let your breathing slow without forcing it. The candles are low, the night is deep, and the oldest written world is waiting in the clay. The Eridu Genesis, the Atrahasis epic, and later Mesopotamian traditions circle the same dark memory. A storm came. The waters rose. A chosen survivor was warned. A great vessel was sealed. The old human noise disappeared under rain. Ziusudra, later remembered in other forms as Utnapishtim, and much later echoed in the figure of Noah, stands at the edge of that memory. In the older Sumerian shadow, he is not just a lucky man. He is the last thread between the drowned world and the rebuilt one. His name is often understood as he who saw life, or he who lengthened the days of life. It is a heavy name when nearly all other voices have gone quiet. Picture his hand on the window. Not a grand movement. Just fingers pressing against wood made damp by storm air. A panel shifts. A thin line of light enters. Then air, cold and wet, slips into the boat. It smells of mud, bitter pitch, soaked timber, and exposed earth turned over by a giant hand. The animals inside stir. Someone behind him whispers. No one knows what is left outside. The window opens wider. There is no city sound. No hammering. No traders calling. No children running between walls. No priest singing the morning words to a god. Only water breathing against the boat. And far away, perhaps, the soft collapse of something that once stood upright. Ziusudra looks out, and the world looks back with no face. This is the first great silence of the story. It is not peaceful at first. It is too large for peace. It is the silence after a door is closed on an age. Even the sun seems careful, coming through the cloud, as if it does not want to wake what has just been buried. Then Ziusudra offers sacrifice. A fire is made on wet ground. That small act must have felt almost impossible. Flame after flood. Heat after drowning. Smoke after endless rain. The offering rises in a thin, dark ribbon toward the washed sky. In the story, the gods gather around it. That image is strange, almost uncomfortable. The divine beings do not return like calm victors. They gather like those who have gone without. The humans who fed them through offerings are gone. The temples that housed them are ruined. The cities that kept their names alive are broken. For 7 days and 7 nights, the smoke of sacrifice had not risen. The world had become quiet, but the quiet had a cost. The gods were hungry. I have always found that moment more haunting than the storm itself. A flood can be imagined as rage. Hunger after victory is more complicated. It suggests regret, or need, or at least the sudden discovery that destruction has consequences even for those who command it. The Anunnaki, the great gods of Sumerian memory, stand within that discovery. They had allowed the flood to erase nearly everything. Now they faced the empty result. Without humans, who would dig the canals? Who would raise the grain? Who would bake the bread, brew the beer, tend the sheep, shape the bricks, polish the statues, open the temple doors at dawn, and speak the names of the gods into the morning air? Some scholars read these stories as myth, ancient attempts to explain flood, kingship, lavor, and social order. Others hear the possibility of older teachers or lost knowledge. That is debated, and we cannot treat it as certainty. But inside the story itself, the spine is clear. The Anunnaki came back after the flood, and they chose not to abandon humanity. They chose to begin again. To understand why that choice mattered, we must drift backward, before the first raindrop, before the sealed boat, before the warning whispered through a wall. We must go to a time when the problem was not human sin, but divine labor. The old epic says that before humans were made, the lesser gods worked. They dug the rivers. They dredged canals. They carried baskets of earth. The senior gods rested above, while the younger gods bent below. And after years of labor, the workers had enough. Their anger rose. They gathered around the house of Enlil, the commanding god of air, storm, authority, and decree. In a darkly funny way, it feels almost familiar. A labor dispute at the beginning of civilization. Even heaven, it seems, had management problems. The lesser gods refused to continue. Then Enki, Lord of wisdom, fresh water, craft, and clever solutions, offered an answer. Create another worker. Create a being from clay and divine substance. Give it enough intelligence to follow commands, enough strength to carry loads, enough breath to multiply, and enough dependence to serve. So, humanity was made. Not from pure tenderness, at least not in this older telling. We were formed for work, clay of the earth, divine essence from a slain god, life mixed into matter. The mother goddess shapes and brings forth the first humans, and the burden of the lesser gods is placed upon human shoulders. There is something cold in that origin. Yet there is also something intimate. Clay is humble, but it remembers touch. The Sumerians lived in a world of clay. Tablets, Bricks, bowls, floors, figurines. It makes sense that they imagined human life beginning there, in the soft material that could become almost anything. The first humans wake into a world already arranged around service. Dig the canal, plant the field, tend the flock, cut the reeds, carry the brick, grind the grain, bring the offering, raise the smoke, keep the god fed. The texts are clear that humanity was useful. That may be the darker truth under the soothing surface of the story. We were not first imagined as royal children wandering in divine gardens. We were imagined as workers made to relieve the gods. Some modern alternative writers, especially Zecharia Sitchin, added another layer, suggesting that the Anunnaki wanted humans to mine gold for a distant planet called Nibiru. Mainstream scholars do not accept that interpretation. They understand gold in these traditions as divine wealth, temple splendor, and royal power. Still, the old theme remains, whichever path one follows. Humanity exists because someone needed labor, and then humanity did what living things always do. It overflowed its purpose. People worked, but they also sang. They carried baskets, but they also named their children. They made offerings, but they also joked, quarreled, desired, grieved, and remembered. A servant species, if it can think and speak and dream, will not remain only a tool. The land filled with people. The cities grew louder. At-dam, grinding stones began their slow circles. At Nuon, work crews shouted across canals. At dusk, families gathered on flat roofs to catch the cooler air. Babies cried. Dogs barked. Merchants argued. Priests chanted. Builders struck brick against brick. Civilization found its voice, and that voice rose into heaven. To us, this sounds like life. To Enlil, it became noise. The Atrahasis tradition preserves the complaint with a startling simplicity. The land was bellowing like a bull. The uproar of mankind had become too intense. Enlil could not sleep. That is the unsettling thing. In the oldest layer, the great destruction is not caused by human wickedness in the way later moral traditions might frame it. It begins with disturbance. Humanity is too many, too loud, too alive. The god wants silence. So the divine council decides on the flood. Not a warning flood. Not a small correction. A flood to wipe the earth clean. Below, people keep living. That is always the sorrow of disaster in old stories. The sky has already decided, but the baker still needs dough. The mother still washes a child. The farmer still checks the canal gate. The scribe still presses numbers into clay, thinking tomorrow will need the record. In Shuruppak, Ziusudra lives among these ordinary continuations. Then Enki comes near. Bound by oath, he cannot warn the man directly. So he speaks to the wall. A reed wall. Thin, practical, full of small spaces where sound can pass. It is one of the most memorable moments in the entire flood tradition. and it carries the quiet humor of a clever god who obeys the letter of the rule while rescuing life from its spirit. Wall. Listen. Read wall. Pay attention. Ziusudra hears. The instructions are simple and terrible. Tear down the house. Build a boat. Seal it with bitumen. Bring family. Bring living seed. Prepare for waters that will cover the known world. Imagine hearing that while daylight still lies calmly on the street. Outside, someone laughs. A potter turns a wheel. A donkey complains in its small, ridiculous way, as donkeys have probably complained since the first week of creation. Life continues with no idea that it has become fragile. Inside, Ziusudra listens through reeds, and the future changes shape. Then comes preparation. Wood is gathered. Ropes are pulled tight. Pitch is heated until its smell thickens in the air. Seams are sealed black. Baskets are carried aboard. Jars of grain, oil, tools, seeds, quiet animals shifting in dimness, family members speaking in low voices, each one trying not to place too much fear into the room. The boat becomes a small world before the old one disappears. Then the rain begins. At first, perhaps, people look up with relief. Rain can be blessing in a hard land. But this rain does not behave like blessing. It continues. It fills lanes. It swells canals until their edges vanish. The rivers rise with a force that feels less like weather and more like judgment. 7 days and 7 nights. Inside the boat, time becomes sound. Water against wood. Animal breath. Rope strain. Someone praying. Someone silent. Someone counting without meaning to. Outside, the world is being returned to mud. The story says even the gods are afraid. That detail matters. Once chaos is released, even those who command it may shrink from what it becomes. The younger gods flee upward. The storm roars below. The ordered earth, the human project, the cities, the fields, the temples, all are hidden beneath the flood. Then the 7th night passes. The rain stops. The silence returns, wider than before. Ziusudra opens the window, and the story begins where we first found it. The world washed. The offering made. The gods gathering around the smoke, hungry and unsettled. Here, in the wet, beginning after the end, the Anunnaki face a choice. They can leave the earth empty, or they can restore the experiment under new rules. They can let the silence remain, or they can accept the risk of human voices again. They choose the voices, but they will not let them rise without control. The water slips back. Mud shines under the early sun. The first footprint presses into soft ground. Somewhere above the ruined plain, the old powers are already planning cities, kingship, temples, laws, and a tighter bond between heaven and earth. The flood has ended. The rebuilding has begun. The choice to rebuild was not simple kindness. It was quieter, colder, and perhaps more believable than that. The gods had seen what a world without humans looked like, and it was not a paradise of silence. It was an empty estate. No bread on the tables of the temples. No beer poured into ritual bowls. No smoke rising from morning offerings. No workers in the fields. No scribes counting grain. No one left to remember the divine names. So the Anunnaki began again. The old Sumerian king list says it with almost no drama. After the flood had swept over, kingship was lowered from heaven. The words feel calm, but they carry the weight of a whole world being reorganized. Kingship was lowered, not invented by men, in the Sumerian imagination. Not won first by ambition. Not built slowly out of arguments around a village fire. It descended. It came from above, a sacred authority placed into human hands, because the gods had decided humanity would continue under supervision. Before the flood, the king list remembers rulers with reigns that stretch beyond ordinary life. Tens of thousands of years. Numbers so large they stop feeling like numbers and begin to feel like mist over deep time. After the flood, the reigns shrink. They are still impossibly long by normal human standards, but they are smaller. 1,200 years. Hundreds of years. Later, closer to the historical world. The numbers draw nearer to something we can almost imagine. Some scholars argue that these reigns are symbolic, perhaps dynasties, sacred eras, or scribal exaggeration meant to honor old cities. Alternative theorists sometimes see a memory of divine or semi-divine bloodlines fading after the flood. That remains debated. The tablets do not explain the mystery for us. They simply give the names and numbers, and then fall silent. I like to imagine the scribe who copied them. A small lamp beside him, wet clay in front of him, the room smelling of oil, dust, and river earth. He presses the reed stylus down and writes of kings whose lives were longer than forests. To him, perhaps, this was not strange. It was inherited memory. His task was not to solve it. His task was to preserve it. After the flood, the first seat of kingship is Kish. That detail matters. The story does not simply return everything to the old pattern. Eridu remains sacred, ancient, and beloved by Enki. But the political beginning after the flood is placed in Kish. It suggests a changed world. The waters have not only destroyed buildings, they have shifted power. After catastrophe, people often say they will rebuild exactly what was lost, but they rarely do. The new wall is thicker. The storehouse is higher. The canal is watched more carefully. The new rules are stricter because fear has become part of the design. That is what the post-flood world feels like. A rebuilt civilization with memory hidden inside its bricks. The gods had learned something too. Total destruction was dangerous. It had nearly emptied their own world of service. So the new order would use limits instead of one great annihilation. The Atrahasis tradition speaks of famine, disease, predators, and mortality as checks placed on human growth. A dark thought, yes, but an important one. The gods would not drown the whole earth each time humanity became too many or too loud. They would manage life through smaller sorrows. It is a bleak arrangement, but it is also the beginning of stability. Humans may live. Humans may build. Humans may raise children, plant barley, sing, overwork, and sleep on rooftops beneath the stars. But they will live within a structure. Kings above them. Temples above kings. Gods above temples. Records, rituals, duties, offerings, boundaries. The first cities of the restored world appear like old lamps being lit one by one. Eridu, Bad Tibira, Ladak, Sipper, Shuruppak. Each name carries a different shade of memory. Eridu belongs to Enki, Lord of wisdom and the deep fresh waters beneath the earth. Bad Tibira glimmers with associations of craft and metal. Larak has its divine place. Sippar shines beneath the sun god. Shurupak remains marked forever by the flood survivor, the city from which Ziusudra sailed into the storm. These are not merely settlements. They are supervised spaces, sacred estates, human communities placed under divine oversight. Eridu deserves a slow look, because myth and archaeology seem to breathe near each other there. Excavators found temple layers built one upon another. A shrine rises, age, fights, and another is built over it. Beneath each floor lies an older floor, and beneath that, an older memory. This is how Sumer often remembers. Not by replacing the past, but by building on it until memory becomes height. The rebuilt cities were organized through temples and storehouses. The source calls them distributive economies. And that phrase may sound dry, but inside it is a whole civilization in motion. Grain comes into the temple. Wool comes in. Oil, fish, dates, sheep, beer, copper, lavur. Then goods move out again. Rations for workers, seed for farmers, wool for weavers, food for priests, offerings for gods, supplies for festivals, clay tablets to mark every movement. Nothing important should vanish without a record. The post-flood world loves records because water has taught it what forgetting feels like. A sealed tablet is a small defense against chaos. A jar counted is a jar remembered. A field boundary written down is a line held against dispute. A worker ration recorded in clay is a promise that the system still sees him, even if only as a name in a measure of barley. This is not a free and equal paradise. It is ordered, watched, counted, hierarchical. But it works. It feeds cities. It keeps canals open. It allows priests, scribes, craftsmen, farmers, soldiers, brewers, weavers, and kings to move inside one great pattern. At the center stands the king. He is powerful, but his power is borrowed. That is the Sumerian idea. A king is not just a strong man with a crown. He is the hinge between heaven and earth. He receives divine authority and turns it into earthly action. Repair the canal. Build the wall. Defend the city. Judge the quarrel. Feed the temple. Maintain the offerings. Keep the god pleased. A bad king is not only a political problem. He is a cosmic danger. If he neglects the god, the city may suffer. If he lets the canal fail, the fields may die. If he grows arrogant, the mandate can move elsewhere. In Mesopotamian thought, defeat, drought, flood, and plague could all be read as signs that order had been disturbed. So the king must stand high, but never too high. Later rituals make this lesson visible. In the New Year festival, the king can be stripped of royal signs, humbled before the god, even struck by the priest, then restored if the god renews his favor. It is a sharp image, but not a graphic one. The crown leaves his head. For a moment, he is only a man. Then the divine order lends him power again. That is the kind of world the Anunnaki are said to rebuild. A world where authority descends, but must be continually confirmed. A world where every office, every tool, every ritual has its place. Now picture Kish in the early post-flood imagination. The city wakes before full light. A woman sweeps mud dust from her threshold. A potter wets his hands and sets clay spinning. A farmer leads an ox toward the fields. A young scribe carries practice tablets and hopes his teacher is in a merciful mood. Somewhere, a donkey brays with the confidence of a creature that believes all dawns belong to it. The palace receives reports. A canal bank is weak. A boundary is disputed. Barley is late from a southern field. A temple herd has lost animals. A messenger waits with a sealed tablet. None of this feels grand at first. Yet this is civilization. Not only ziggurats and myths, but the daily refusal to let things fall apart. The king listens. Officials count. Scribes write. Workers go out. Feet press into canal mud. Baskets scrape against hips. Sunlight grows hard on the shoulders. Someone complains. Someone laughs. Someone sings a work rhythm under his breath. The water is guided back where it should go. The field will drink. The barley will rise. The temple will receive its share. The god will be fed. This is how order survives. Not in one miracle, but in repetition. Morning offering. Canal repair. Tablet sealed. Bread baked. Law spoken. Story remembered. The me, the divine decrees or powers of civilization, wait at the edge of this rebuilt world. They are not fully opened yet, but their presence is already felt. Kingship is one of them. Priesthood, writing, music, law, craft, desire, lamentation, and even destruction belong to that sacred collection of powers. In Sumerian myth, these powers are almost like objects, things that can be held, guarded, transferred, and even stolen. That image is beautiful. Civilization as a set of sacred tools kept in the deep house of Enki, under the waters of the Apsu, waiting for the right hands. But before the gifts can spread, the container must exist. a city to hold law, a temple to hold ritual, a palace to hold command, a school to hold writing, a field to hold seed, a memory to hold the flood. The post-flood order is that container. At night, the city softens. Heat leaves the walls. Families climb to flat roofs. Water jars cool in the open air. A mother tells a child the old story, but gently, because children must sleep. The waters came, she says. The old world was lost. Ziusudra survived. The gods returned. Kingship came down again. The cities were rebuilt. The child listens with wide eyes. Rain will never sound simple to that child again. That is what catastrophe does. It teaches ordinary things to carry hidden meaning. A cloud is not only a cloud. A river is not only a river. A broken canal gate is not only a repair job. Each might be a reminder that order is fragile. And yet the people live. They bargain in markets. They brew beer. They weave cloth. They marry. Mourn. Yoke. Pray sincerely. Complain about officials. And worry about the harvest. No civilization could survive if everyone walked around all day whispering about cosmic doom. Even under divine supervision, someone still burns the bread. That human texture matters. The Anunnaki world, as the tablets imagine it, is not only dark, it is lived in. It has dust in corners, oil on hands, barley in teeth, and laughter slipping out where priests might prefer silence. Still, the structure remains. The gods are near. The temples breathe. Enki keeps wisdom in the deep waters. Enlil holds authority in the wind. The king rules by permission. The scribe presses memory into clay. The farmer trusts the canal. The priest trusts the ritual. The city trusts that if each duty is done, morning will come again. This is the second beginning after the flood. Not innocent, not free, not gentle in every part. Built from fear, labor, obedience, and need, but also built from astonishing persistence. A brick set into wet mortar, a seal rolled over clay, a field opened to water, a prayer spoken before dawn by someone who cannot prove a God is listening, but speaks anyway. The fire beside us is lower now. The room grows darker at the edges. Beyond the imagined city, the rivers continue their slow breath. In Eridu, beneath layered temples, the deep waters of Enki hold their secrets. In Kish, kingship sits newly lowered from heaven. In Shirupak, the memory of the boat has not faded. Across the wet fields of the rebuilt world, smoke rises again. The gods have their offerings. Humanity has its second chance. And somewhere inside the clay, the next gift is waiting. The water has gone back into its channels, but the memory of it remains everywhere. It remains in the mud that clings to sandals. It remains in the broken reed mats caught in low branches. It remains in the way people look at the river now, not as a friend, not as an enemy, but as something older than both. A river can feed a field in the morning and swallow a city by night. The people of the first rebuilt world know this in their bones. Ziusudra stands on new ground, although the ground is old. That is the strange thing after a flood. The earth is the same earth, but it no longer feels familiar. A path that once led to a gate now disappears under silt. A courtyard lies beneath a shallow pool. A temple step shows just above the mud like the back of some sleeping animal. The world has been rearranged by water, and every familiar place has to be learned again. The gods have gathered around the smoke. No one in the old story lingers too long on their faces. Perhaps that is because the divine face is dangerous to imagine too clearly. It is enough to see them near the offering, drawn by the scent, by the sign that at least one human hand can still raise fire toward heaven. The sacrifice is small against the ruined world. A little flame, a little smoke, a little warmth in the wet air. Yet the gods come to it. That is the first sign that the relationship between heaven and earth has not ended. It has been damaged. It has become frightening. But it has not ended. Enlil is angry when he discovers that a human survived. The plan had been total. Silence was supposed to cover the land. No more noise. No more crowded cities. No more restless people rising like insects from the river plain. And yet here is Ziusudra, breathing, bowing, making offerings in the clean light after destruction. It is a small human survival, but to Enlil it is disobedience made visible. Enki has broken the spirit of the decree without breaking its wording. He did not speak to the man, not directly. He spoke to the reed wall. A clever god can make even a wall into an accomplice. I admit, that detail still makes me smile a little. In the middle of one of the darkest stories ever pressed into clay, there is this quiet legal trick. No, I did not tell him. I told the wall. If the wall had loose ears, that is hardly my fault. But the laughter fades quickly, because what follows is serious. The gods must decide what to do with survival. A destroyed world is simple in one way. Nothing asks anything of you. No city requires judgment. No farmer requests rain. No priest asks for signs. No child cries in fever. No king begs for victory. Silence has no paperwork. Silence has no complaints. But silence also gives nothing back. The Anunnaki had created humanity to carry labor, to tend the earth, to maintain offerings, to keep the divine houses alive with food, smoke, and memory. Without humanity, the system becomes empty. The temples are only wet bricks. The fields are only mud. The gods have power, but no servants, no stewards, no voices repeating their names. So Enki argues for continuation. He does not say that humanity is harmless. Humanity is not harmless. Even in myth, humans are noisy, multiplying, forgetful, hungry, ambitious, and sometimes astonishingly foolish. If you have ever watched people gather around a small problem and somehow turn it into a larger one, you can sympathize with the gods at least a little. But Enki understands something Enlil does not want to admit. A living world cannot be perfectly quiet. Life makes sound. Seeds split. Animals call. Babies cry. Workers sing. Markets argue. Clay jars break. Someone always drops something at the worst possible time. The question is not how to create silence. The question is how to keep life from becoming chaos. So the new plan is management, not extinction. Limits. The old tradition says that after the flood, the gods allowed humanity to continue, but under conditions. There would be famine at times. There would be disease. There would be predators. There would be mortality woven deeply into human life. These are hard gifts, if we can even call them gifts. They are checks, boundaries, bitter cords tied around growth. The flood had been too much. It had almost undone the divine project itself. The new world would be controlled by smaller sorrows instead of one enormous ending. This is one of the darkest ideas in the story, and it should be spoken gently. The tablets do not give us a universe where suffering is an accident. They give us a universe where suffering can be imagined as administration, a way to keep numbers down, a way to keep noise from rising too far, a way to prevent the gods from needing to wash everything away again. A terrible thought. Yet from inside that thought, civilization returns. The first survivors step into mud. They gather what can be gathered. A jar here. A tool there. A beam still usable if dried in the sun. Seeds, if any remain dry. Animals, if they have survived the long darkness of the boat. Every small object becomes precious. A knife is not just a knife. It is future bread. A basket is not just a basket. It is harvest. A sealed jar of grain is not just food. It is time. The old world had been abundant enough to become loud. The new world begins with counting. How many hands? How many animals? How much grain? How much daylight before night? How much strength remains in the body after grief? Imagine Ziusudra watching his people step down from the vessel. No one says much. They are alive, which is almost too large to understand. Their feet sink into earth that still trembles with memory. The air smells of wet clay and ash. A bird calls somewhere, and everyone turns toward it as if the sound itself were a blessing. The gods grant Ziusudra a special fate in some traditions. He is taken far away, given a kind of life beyond ordinary life. In later stories, Utnapishtim becomes the immortal flood survivor, the one Gilgamesh will seek when death becomes unbearable. But the people who remain must do something less glamorous and more difficult. They must begin. Beginning after catastrophe is not romantic at first. It is sore muscles. It is ruined tools. It is not knowing where to sleep. It is arguing over whether to rebuild near the old place or move higher. It is searching through mud for a familiar cup and finding only a fragment. It is pretending not to cry when something ordinary is gone. The Anunnaki survey this beginning. According to the logic of the source, their work after the flood is not a single act. It is a program, a structure, a controlled restart of human civilization. First survival, then rule, then cities, then knowledge, then ritual, then distance. The second lowering of kingship belongs to this restart. Power descends again, but now it descends into a world that knows what happens when order fails. Kingship is no longer only a gift. It is a restraint. The king becomes the visible cord between the people and the divine. He must organize labor, repair canals, raise walls, maintain offerings, and make sure the gods are not neglected. That last duty matters more than almost anything. Before the flood, the gods had been disturbed by human noise. After the flood, they were disturbed by human absence. The rebuilt world must avoid both extremes. Enough humans to work and worship, not so many that their sound becomes unbearable. Enough freedom to build, not so much that the system escapes control. A careful balance, or at least the dream of one. Kish rises as the first seat of post-flood kingship. The name sits in the clay like a marker placed after a storm. Around it, life begins to arrange itself. Officials, storehouses, fields, temples, workers, scribes. The very act of administration becomes sacred, because counting is how survival protects itself from chaos. In a rebuilt city, the first tablets are not poetry. They are lists. Barley, sheep, workers, ration, land, tools, debts, offerings. It may sound plain, but there is deep comfort in a list after disaster. A list says that the world can be named. A list says that things have not all dissolved. A list says that tomorrow may require preparation, which means tomorrow is expected. The gods want that expectation restored. At the edge of the new world, the old sacred cities are remembered. Eridu, the deep city of Enki. Bad Tibira, Larak, Sippar, Shuruppak, marked forever by the flood. They return not only as homes for people, but as stations of divine order. Each city is linked to a deity. Each temple is a house for a god. Each house requires food, music, offerings, cleaning, clothing, and words spoken in the correct way. The city is not human property in the deepest sense. It is divine estate. Humans live there, yes. They marry, complain, cook, trade, gossip, and occasionally make life difficult in that special human way that no cosmic plan has ever fully prevented. But the city belongs first to the god. The king manages it. The priests maintain it. The workers feed it. The scribes remember it. This is the world the flood creates by destroying the old one. A world of hierarchy. A world of ritual. A world where the memory of water sits behind every law. Some scholars see in this a natural evolution of temple society after real floods in southern Mesopotamia, where environmental disaster, irrigation management, and urban growth shaped religious imagination. That reading is grounded and careful. Others see the outline of deliberate intervention. Advanced beings reorganizing human life after a catastrophe. The story allows the question to remain open, like a door left slightly ajar in a dark room. What matters for our night journey is the tale the tablets tell. The Anunnaki did not simply return and vanish. They stayed near. They assigned. They instructed. They established. They placed kings beneath heaven and temples above daily life. They made sure that the smoke would rise again, morning after morning, so the silence after the flood would never become permanent. And slowly, the mud begins to dry. Days pass. Then, seasons. The first green shoots appear where silt has settled. That is the mercy of Riverland. It can destroy, then feed from the same brown hand. The flood leaves grief, but also fertile soil. Barley roots push into the damp earth. Reeds return along the water. Birds land in shallow pools. Cattle low under a pale sky. The world does not apologize. It simply grows. People follow. A woman presses her thumb into a clay seal. A man lifts a wall brick into place. A child learns to fear deep water and love bread. A priest cleans a small sanctuary. A worker opens a canal gate and watches water slide into a field with the soft sound of survival. No one living then would say they were building history. They were only trying to keep hunger away, to please the gods, to bury grief under work, to make the next morning possible. Yet that is often how history begins. Not with trumpets, with mud under the nails, with smoke rising from a repaired altar, with a king receiving authority he did not create, with a god accepting food from human hands again. The new world is still fragile. It rests on obedience, fear, gratitude, and need. It rests on the memory of what happened when divine patience failed. It rests on Enki's cleverness and Enlil's anger. It rests on Ziusudra's survival. And it rests on one quiet decision made after the waters fell. Humanity would not be erased. Humanity would be managed. The candles beside us burn lower. The fire shifts. In the silence between the small cracks of wood, we can almost hear the rebuilt cities forming in the distance. Not quickly, not cleanly. One wall, one field, one temple, one tablet, one offering. The Anunnaki have chosen continuation. Now they must teach the survivors what kind of world they are allowed to build. The survivors do not rebuild civilization by memory alone. Memory can tell a person where a gate once stood, or where a shrine used to catch the first light of morning. But memory cannot teach a flooded field how to feed a city again. For that, the old story says, humanity needed gifts. Not jewels, not crowns. Tools of order. The Sumerians called them the me, divine powers or decrees, the deep principles that made civilization possible. They are difficult to translate because they are not only laws, not only skills, not only sacred commands. They are all of these at once. Kingship is a me. Priesthood is a me. Writing, music, craft, justice, battle, lamentation, desire, wisdom, even destruction. The Sumerians imagined the world as something held together by these powers, like a woven mat that would fall apart if too many reeds were pulled loose. In the stories, the me belong first to Enki. That feels right. Enki is the god of wisdom, sweet water, hidden knowledge, and clever survival. He is the one who warned Ziusudra. He is the one who understood that total destruction would leave the gods with nothing. He is the one who lives in the Apsu, the deep freshwater realm beneath the earth, a place that seems less like a palace and more like a quiet reservoir of secrets. Picture it softly, far below the mud-brick cities, below roots, gravis, and the cool dark of wells. There is water. Not storm water, not flood water, still water, ancient water, the kind that does not rush, but waits. In that depth, Enki keeps the patterns of civilization as if they were sealed jars resting on shelves in the dark. Agriculture waits there. Writing waits there. Law waits there. Music waits there, silent until a human hand touches a string. After the flood, these powers must rise again. The rebuilt world needs more than kingship. A king without knowledge is only a loud man in a large room. A city without writing forgets what it owes and what it owns. A field without irrigation is only hope lying under dust. A temple without ritual is a house with no voice. So the gifts begin to move. The myth of Inanna and Enki gives us one of the strangest images in this tradition. Inanna, goddess of love, power, and the great city of Uruk, travels to Eridu. She visits Enki. There is feasting. There is beer. Enki becomes generous, perhaps too generous, as people sometimes do when the cups keep returning full. He gives her the me, more than 100 powers of civilization, and she loads them onto her boat. I have always liked that part, because it is grand and slightly comic at the same time. The fate of civilization moves by boat after a divine drinking party. Myth understands human nature better than we expect. When Enki grows sober and realizes what has happened, he sends servants to retrieve the gifts. But Inanna keeps them. She brings them to Uruk. The old sacred power of Eridu begins to flow toward a new city, a city of walls, trade, writing, and ambition. Some scholars read this as a political story, a memory of cultural power moving from older Eridu to rising Uruk. That reading makes sense. Cities tell myths to explain why they matter. But inside the story, the deeper assumption remains. Civilization is not treated as something humans invented, alone in a straight line from ignorance to wisdom. It is something given, transferred, guarded, lost, recovered, and carried carefully across water. After the flood, that idea matters even more. The world has already shown how quickly human work can vanish. A city can become mud. A temple can become a mound. A storehouse can open like a broken jar. If civilization is to survive, its knowledge must be carried in forms that outlast one generation. Writing becomes one of the greatest of those forms. At first, writing is humble. It counts things: grain, sheep, beer, oil, lavore. The earliest marks are not poetry, not prayer, not kings boasting of conquest. They are accounting how much came in, how much went out, who received rations, which field produced barley, which herd belonged to the temple. That may sound ordinary, but it is a miracle wearing work clothes. Before writing, memory lives in mouths. After writing, memory can sit in clay and wait. It can survive the death of the speaker. It can cross a season, a rain, a collapse. It can be buried in the ground and wake thousands of years later. A reed stylus presses into a wet tablet. The mark is small. The consequence is enormous. The Sumerians would say writing belonged among the gifts of civilization, a sacred tool, a way for the ordered world to remember itself. And so, in the post-flood imagination, scribes become more than clerks. They are guardians of continuity. They sit in the shade while others labor in sun, but their labor is its own kind of burden. A crooked sign can change a number. A lost tablet can disturb an account. A forgotten ritual line can offend a god. Precision becomes devotion. See the young student in the tablet house. His knees are dusty. His hand aches from holding the stylus. The teacher is not gentle, because ancient teachers rarely seem to have believed that gentleness improved handwriting. The boy copies signs again and again. Grain, ox, king, temple, God, Vata. He may not know it, but he is learning how to hold a city together. Mathematics rises beside writing. The Sumerians used a base 60 system, and its echo still lives with us. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle. Every clock face is, in a quiet way, a little Mesopotamian ghost. The numbers served practical needs first. Measuring fields, dividing rations, tracking labor, calculating volumes of grain, managing loans. But from these practical roots grew sophisticated ways of thinking. Later, Babylonian astronomy would use inherited mathematical traditions to observe planets, predict cycles, and watch the heavens with remarkable care. Some alternative theorists ask whether such knowledge came too quickly, whether it suggests teaching by advanced beings or survivors of an older, lost civilization. Mainstream scholars answer that human beings, given cities, agriculture, records, and generations of observation, are capable of extraordinary development. The tablets themselves give credit to the gods. Agriculture, too, is treated as a divine gift. This is easy to understand if we stand in a field after the flood. The land may be fertile, but fertility is not food until it is organized. Water must be guided. Seeds must be chosen. Soil must be opened at the right time. Birds must be chased away. Harvest must be cut, dried, threshed, stored, protected from rot, rats, theft, and bad luck. The Sumerian instruction to a farmer reads with the calm authority of someone who knows that survival depends on details. Prepare the field. Open the irrigation water. Watch the furrows. Sow at the proper time. Bring in the crop. It is practical, almost plain, and that is why it feels sacred. Imagine Enki not as a distant shining figure, but as wisdom hidden inside every correct action. The farmer checks the canal gate. The brewer watches the foam. The potter knows when the clay is too wet. The builder feels whether a brick has dried enough. The scribe trims the reed to the right angle. Civilization is made of such small exactness. After catastrophe, exactness becomes mercy. The 7 sages, the Apkallu, belong to this world of teaching. In Mesopotamian tradition, they appear as culture bringers, semi-divine beings connected with Enki and the Abzu. Sometimes they are shown as fishmen, or men wearing fish cloaks, strange figures who come from the watery deep to instruct humanity. The first, Adapa in some traditions, serves the early kings of Eridu before the flood. Later sages continue the work after the waters. Were they literal beings? Priests in symbolic dress. Memories of wise survivors. Mythic forms of transmitted knowledge. The texts do not let us settle the matter neatly. That uncertainty is part of the spell. If you were standing with me in a museum, looking at a relief of one of those fish-cloaked figures, you might feel the same little chill I do. Not fear exactly. More like the sense that ancient people were trying to tell us knowledge had a shape, and it came from somewhere deep. The rebuilt cities take in these gifts and become more than shelters. Eridu holds sacred depth. Uruk grows with walls and stories. Sipar watches the sun. Kish holds kingship. Nippur speaks with the authority of Enlil. Each city becomes a knot in a divine and human network. Temples collect goods. Schools train scribes. Fields feed workers. Workers build temples. Temples feed gods. Not perfectly. Never perfectly. Humans remain human. Someone cheats the measure of grain. Someone waters a field out of turn. Someone flatters an official. Someone complains that the gods are taking their time answering a prayer. The system is sacred, but it is also full of people, which means it creaks. Still, it holds. That is the miracle after the flood. Not that the world becomes pure. It does not. Not that humans become obedient angels. They certainly do not. The miracle is that order returns at all. Knowledge survives. Skills are taught. Children learn words their grandparents feared might disappear. A temple song is sung again. A canal opens again. A clay tablet dries in the sun and becomes memory with a body. The ziggurats begin to rise from this order. See them in the distance. Stepped shapes of mud brick catching the last light. They are not tombs, like the pyramids of Egypt. They are temples, platforms, houses of divine presence, mountains made by human hands in a flat riverland. To mainstream archaeology, they are religious and economic centers. To some fringe theorists, they resemble landing platforms or communication towers for beings from the sky. There is no solid academic evidence for that claim, but the idea persists because the texts say the gods came down and dwelt in temples. The safest truth is already strange enough. The people built mountains for invisible powers. They carried brick after brick, basket after basket, up ramps under a burning sky. They did this because the gods needed houses and because the human world needed a vertical line between earth and heaven. Every ziggurat is a sentence written in brick. We are here. Remember us. Come down. Night settles over the rebuilt land. In one house, a child traces wedge shapes in dust with a fingertip. In another, a woman knots thread for a loom. Near the canal, a man listens to frogs and worries about the water level. In the temple, a priest checks the lamp. In the school, a tablet of clumsy student signs dries beside the master's clean copy. Above them all, stars appear. Those stars will be watched, counted, named, and folded into calendars. They will tell farmers when to prepare and priests when to celebrate. The heavens become another tablet, vast and dark, marked with moving signs. This is how the Anunnaki's post-flood world expands. First, survival, then kingship, then cities, then gifts. Not gifts that make life easy, but gifts that make life possible to organize. Writing does not remove grief. It records it. Law does not remove injustice. It gives people a place to argue. Agriculture does not remove hunger forever. It holds hunger back one season at a time. Mathematics does not tame the universe. It gives the mind a lamp. The gifts are humble when seen closely. That is why they endure. The fire beside us is quieter now. The imagined clay has cooled. Somewhere in Eridu, Enki's deep waters hold the last secrets not yet carried upward. Somewhere in Uruk, Inanna's boat glides away with the powers of civilization. The world after the flood is no longer only alive. It is learning. And once a world begins to learn, it begins to build upward. The first mountains after the flood were not made by nature. They were made by hands. Brick by brick, basket by basket, under the pale glare of the Mesopotamian sun, the rebuilt cities began to lift their temples toward heaven. The land itself was flat, soft, river-made, always remembering water. So human beings built height where height did not belong. They raised stepped platforms of mud brick, wide at the base, narrow above, climbing slowly into the sky like prayers given shape. These were the ziggurats. They were not tombs. That is important. They were not houses for the dead in the Egyptian sense. They were houses for the living gods, or at least for the divine presence that entered the sacred statue and the upper chamber. They were mountains made for a river plain, artificial peaks where heaven and earth could meet without needing to touch too roughly. Imagine one in the last hour before dawn. The city is still mostly dark. The roofs are quiet. Dogs sleep in doorways. The canal water is black and smooth, carrying a few pale stars on its back. Above the low houses, the ziggurat rises in terraces. Its walls are not white marble, not clean stone, but sun-dried and fired brick, clay transformed by heat, the same humble material that made bowls, tablets, floors, and human bodies in the old imagination. The steps are cool before sunrise. A priest climbs them slowly. His sandals make soft sounds on the baked brick. His linen brushes his ankles. One hand holds a small vessel of purified water. Another attendant carries oil. Another carries incense. They move carefully, because the house of a god is not entered the way one enters a market. A market forgives noise. A god does not always forgive. At the top, the shrine waits. It is not large when compared to the huge base beneath it. That always feels strange to modern eyes. We expect the summit to hold something vast, something loud, but the most sacred spaces are often small. A chamber, a curtain, a statue, a lamp, a place where only a few may stand, and even they stand with measured breath. The Sumerians believed the god could dwell there. Some modern alternative theories look at the ziggurat and see something else. Perhaps a landing platform, perhaps a signal tower, perhaps a memory of beings who came from the sky. Mainstream scholars do not accept that as evidence. They understand these structures as temples, economic centers, and sacred stages for ritual life. Yet even the careful explanation leaves us with wonder. The people built these mountains because they believed the gods came down. That alone is strange enough to carry the night. Below the shrine, the whole temple complex begins to wake. In Nippur, the great temple of Enlil was called the Mountain House. That name tells us much. Enlil was Lord of Command, wind, storm, and divine authority. His temple was not merely a place to visit. It was a seat of power, a household, an estate, a storehouse, a court, a school, and a breathing machine of ritual. Before sunrise, the priests wash. Water is poured over hands, wrists, face, and feet. The water is not ordinary in their minds. It is connected through wells and ritual thought to the deep waters below the earth. The Apsu, the hidden reservoir of Enki. The body must be clean before approaching the divine. The voice must be ready. The steps must be exact. The chief priest dresses in clean linen. Oil touches his skin. Cypress, juniper, cedar, or some other sharp resinous scent rises in the cool air. The smell is not only pleasant, it marks separation. Outside is the human city, with sweat, animals, cook fires, dust, and ordinary breath. Inside is the god's house, where everything must be made worthy. The curtain is drawn back. The statue waits in the innermost chamber. Try to see it softly, not as a museum object, not as a dead relic, but as the center of a living morning. Wood imported from far away, gold beaten thin and laid across the surface, lapis in the eyes, blue as deep evening, brought from lands beyond the horizon. Shell, stone, metal, cloth, oil, incense. The statue does not blink, but everyone behaves as if it sees. To the Sumerians, this was not merely a symbol. It was the god made present. That idea changes everything. If the statue is only a symbol, then dressing it is theater. Feeding it is metaphor. Waking it is performance. But if the divine presence truly rests there, then every act becomes service. The god has slept. The god must be woken gently. The god must be washed, clothed, fed, honored, and never startled into anger. The morning ritual begins. The priest speaks in a low voice. Enlil, great Lord, mountain of command, rise to your house. Receive the day. Look kindly upon your servants. The exact ancient words are lost to most of us, or survive only in fragments, but the pattern is clear. A god is greeted like a great ruler waking in his chamber. Music may sound softly. Bells, chanting, the slow vibration of a lyre string. Nothing harsh, nothing rushed. A small kindness lives inside the ritual, even though the system around it is severe. The god is dressed. Old garments are removed with care. New robes are placed upon the statue. Blue, purple, white, or patterned cloth, woven by temple women, whose hands may have spent months preparing fabric no ordinary person could wear. Folds are adjusted. Ornaments are set in place. The divine figure is made ready to receive the world. Then comes the meal. The kitchens of a great temple are already warm. Bread has been baked before dawn. Barley loaves, flat cakes, perhaps sweetened with dates or honey for special occasions. Meat has been roasted. Bowls of fruit have been arranged. Jars of milk, beer, and sometimes wine are carried by attendants who know that a stumble in such a place is not merely embarrassing. It is dangerous. Beer deserves a moment, because Sumer without beer is almost impossible to imagine. Beer was food, drink, offering, vagus, celebration, and comfort. Thick, nourishing, often drunk through straws from jars. It was part of daily life and sacred life both. If wine belonged to distant hills, beer belonged to the river cities. The offering table is set. Bread, meat, dates, milk, beer, incense. The god receives the essence. The priests wait. This waiting is part of the ceremony. You do not place food before a god and then snatch it away like a nervous servant. The divine guest is given time. The lamp flame trum. Smoke curls. Outside, the city brightens. A rooster calls. A donkey complains somewhere below with perfect lack of reverence, because animals rarely understand theology. After the waiting, the priests return. The food is removed. It has touched the sacred presence. It now carries blessing. Since the god does not consume physical food in the ordinary human manner, the offerings become food for the priestly household. The god is fed. The priests are fed. The bond is renewed. This may sound practical because it is practical. Ancient religion often lived where mystery and survival met. A temple was not a quiet chapel tucked away from life. It was an engine. It owned land. It employed workers. It stored grain. It managed herds. It ran breweries, bakeries, textile workshops, and scribal offices. It lent goods. It collected offerings. It redistributed rations. It fed gods and people within the same sacred economy. All day, offerings arrive. A farmer brings a lamb. A widow brings a small jar of honey. A merchant brings fine cloth from far away. Someone brings oil. Someone brings dates. Someone brings a promise written on clay. At the outer courts, priests receive these gifts. Scribes record them. Nothing is allowed to dissolve into forgetfulness. A sheep must become a mark. A jar must become a number. Devotion itself becomes administrative. This is not because the Sumerians were cold. It is because they knew the world could vanish. A recorded offering is a way of saying, this happened, this was given, this relationship still holds. The temple complex is full of people by mid-morning. There are high priests who approach the inner chamber. There are ordinary priests who keep the fires, clean the vessels, prepare incense, chant prayers, and watch the calendar. There are musicians who know which melody soothes which god, and which lament is needed when the city fears drought, war, or disease. There are cooks, brewers, bakers, sweepers, guards, weavers, herdsmen, accountants, and boys carrying tablets with serious faces. The scribes sit in shade. A reed stylus moves. Wet clay receives marks. Grain from the eastern field. 10 jars of beer to the work crew. 3 sheep received at the gate. Cloth issued to the sanctuary. A loan of silver sealed before witnesses. The handwriting is small, practical, and not meant for poetry. Yet thousands of years later, these plain records are among the reasons we can hear the ancient city at all. The poets wanted eternity, but the accountants accidentally achieved it. There is a little humor in that, and a little justice. At the school, the tablet house, boys from wealthy families copy signs until their hands ache. The teacher watches. He is probably not as gentle as we would like. A crooked wedge, a lazy line, a forgotten sign, all can bring correction. The student learns lists of words, measures of grain, divine names, legal phrases, and calculations. He learns that writing is power, and that power is tiring. Outside, heat thickens. By midday, the temple courts glare with light. The mud brick walls hold warmth. Shadows shrink. People move more slowly. Workers seek shade when they can. The river smell rises from the canals. Dust clings to skin. Still, the rituals continue. Lamps must be filled. Incense must be renewed. The god's chamber must remain ordered. A day in the divine house cannot simply pause because humans are hot. Evening brings the second meal. Again the food is prepared. Again the offering is carried. Again, the prayers are spoken. The day closes as it opened, with service. Then comes the intimate ritual of night. The god must be put to bed. The statue is dressed for rest. The chamber is quieted. Lamps are lowered. The divine household settles. Guards take their places. The sacred fire remains alive, watched by those assigned to the night hours. Smoke rises into darkness, a thin signal saying that in this city, at least, the covenant still breathes. Here is a place where the gods are remembered. Here is a place where humans still serve. This daily rhythm is one of the strongest answers to what the Anunnaki did after the flood. They did not only rebuild cities in brick, they rebuilt habits. They made repetition sacred. Morning food, evening food, clean garments, counted offerings, lit lamps, open canals, sealed tablets. The world would not be trusted to memory alone. It would be held together by ritual repeated until it became time itself. And perhaps that is why the ziggurats rose so high. Not to escape Earth, but to remind Earth to keep looking upward. Night settles now over Nippur, over Eridu, over Kish, over the river plain where rebuilt life glows in small lamps. The temple stands above the sleeping roofs. Its bricks are dark against the stars. In the upper chamber, the god rests. In the lower rooms, tablets dry. In the courtyards, ashes cool. The city sleeps lightly because it knows what water once did. But the smoke still rises. And while the smoke rises, the world continues. The daily rituals kept the city breathing, but festivals made the whole cosmos breathe with it. A normal morning could feed the god. A normal evening could close the temple doors. But certain days were larger than ordinary time. They belonged to renewal, fear, memory, and public wonder. On those days, the city did not simply worship. It reenacted the order of the universe so that the universe would remember how to remain ordered. The most famous of these great festivals was later known as Akitu, the New Year Festival. It changed across cities and centuries, and the details belonged more fully to Babylon in its later form. But the deeper pattern reaches back into the Mesopotamian way of seeing the world. Creation is not safely finished. Chaos is not safely defeated. The world must be renewed. That idea feels strange to us at first. We think of a myth as a story about something that happened long ago. The Sumerians and Babylonians thought more ritually. A sacred story was not only remembered, it was performed so that its power continued. If the battle against chaos is never retold, perhaps chaos begins to listen at the door. So the people gather. The city changes before dawn. Streets are swept, gates are decorated. Incense burns in small bowls. Musicians tune lyres and drums. Priests move through courtyards with faces made serious by duty. Families come from narrow lanes, from workshops, from houses with flat roofs still cool from the night. Farmers arrive with dust on their hems. Merchants stand beside laborers. Children push forward until someone pulls them back by the shoulder. Everyone wants to see. the god will come out. That is not a small thing. Most days, the divine presence remains hidden in the deep chamber, served by priests behind curtains and walls. During festival time, the city may see the statue carried in procession, clothed, perfumed, crowned, shining in the hard sunlight. To the people, this is not an object moving through the street. It is the god visiting his own city. The drums begin, slow at first, then steadier. Feet shift, flower petals fall. Women sing, men bow their heads. Some weep because awe has a way of opening the face before the mind can stop it. The statue passes, carried by trained hands, balanced, guarded, surrounded by incense. The smoke bends around the divine image and drifts over the crowd. A child sees the lapis eyes and remembers them for life. During the festival, the creation story is recited. In later Babylon, the Enuma Elish told how Marduk defeated the chaos being Tiamat and shaped the ordered world. Earlier cities had their own divine centers, their own gods, their own sacred patterns. But the meaning is consistent. Order must be spoken aloud. The world must hear its own beginning again. Hours pass. The priest recites line after line. The crowd listens. Some understand every word. Some only catch the rhythm. Some grow tired, because even sacred attention has human limits. A boy thinks about bread. An old man shifts his weight from one aching knee to the other. A woman closes her eyes and lets the chant pass through her like river water. This too is part of ritual. Not everyone is perfectly reverent every moment. No city has ever been made of saints. Yet the collective act matters. The story is spoken. The people are present. The old battle against chaos is remembered. One of the most striking festival rites is the humiliation of the king. The king enters the temple as the highest human authority, dressed in signs of power. Crown, scepter, royal garments. He is the one who commands armies, judges disputes, orders canals cleared, and stands between the city and its enemies. Yet before the god, he is stripped of these signs. The crown is removed. The scepter is taken. The priest strikes him, not as random cruelty, but as ritual truth. For one breath, the king is reminded that he is only a man. His power is borrowed. His throne rests on divine permission. If he has ruled unjustly, neglected the city, or failed the god, the order may be withdrawn. Hek kneels. He declares that he has not sinned against the city. He has not neglected the temple. He has not oppressed the people beyond measure. He has kept the sacred duties. The priest watches. The people wait. Somewhere in that silence, power trembles. Then the crown is restored. The king rises again, renewed by the god. It is theater. Yes. It is politics. Yes. It is religion. Yes. In Mesopotamia, those things are not easily separated. The public sees the king humbled and returned. The city breathes easier. The coming year can begin beneath a ruler whose authority is passed through divine judgment. Later in the festival, gods from other cities may arrive in procession. Their statues are carried like honored guests. The divine council is imagined on earth. Roads fill with color, song, dust, and heat. It is as if heaven has become visible for a few days and is moving through the streets on human shoulders. The sacred marriage also belongs to this world of renewal. We must speak carefully here. Some scholars understand it as symbolic, a ritual union of divine powers represented through ceremony, song, and royal presence. Others argue that in some periods and places it may have involved a physical rite between king and priestess. The evidence is debated. And for our story, the symbolic meaning is enough. The union of god and goddess renews fertility. The land must live. The flocks must multiply. The barley must rise. Love, grain, milk, rain, and royal power are gathered into one ritual image. At the end of the festival, the mood loosens. The storehouses open. Food is distributed. Beer flows. Musicians play. The city that had stood solemn before the god now laughs in the streets. Children eat until they are sleepy. Workers drink more than they planned. Someone sings too loudly, and someone else tells him he sounds like a goat with legal authority. That small silliness matters. After days of cosmic seriousness, people need release. Renewal is not complete until the body believes it too. But festival life is only one side of the post-flood order. Most days are smaller. Most lives unfold in courtyards, fields, workshops, kitchens, and canal banks. Let us walk quietly through an ordinary house. It is built of mud brick around a central courtyard. The walls are thick against heat. The rooms are simple. Mats on the floor. Reed beds. Storage jars along the wall. Grain, dried fish, dates, oil, beer. A roof above where the family can sleep on hot nights under the stars. In one wall, there may be a small household shrine. Not grand like a temple. Just a niche, a little place for protective figures, personal gods, family prayers. Before work begins, the head of the household may offer a few words. Protection for the day, health for the children, fairness in trade, mercy from powers too large to understand. Then work begins. Farmers go to the fields before the heat grows sharp. Their world depends on canals. Without irrigation, the land can dry into hunger. With too much water, it can turn against them. Canal care is not optional. It is survival. The farmer knows the gate, the ditch, the furrow, the timing of water. He watches the soil and sky the way a sailor watches wind. The instruction to a farmer gives this kind of knowledge a sacred dignity. Plow at the right time. Manage the water. Sow carefully. Protect the crop. Harvest when the grain is ready. The advice is practical, but in a world where Enki is the source of wisdom, practical knowledge carries divine weight. A field is a kind of temple when hunger is near. Craftsmen work in shaded places. The potter turns wet clay into jars, bowls, and cups. The metal worker heats copper and tin, making bronze tools and weapons. The weaver sits at the loom, passing thread through thread until cloth appears, slow as thought becoming visible. The jeweler drills tiny beads of carnelian or lapis, each one small enough to vanish if dropped in dust. Women work everywhere in this world, though not always with equal freedom. Many are bound by household expectations, marriage, childbirth, weaving, brewing, and food preparation. Yet some own property, conduct business, manage goods, sell beer, serve in temples, and hold influence through family or ritual rank. The high priestess, especially in major cults, can stand near the center of sacred power. Children learn by watching before they learn by words. A girl watches her mother measure grain. A boy watches his father repair a tool. A child of a wealthy house carries a practice tablet to school and tries not to look afraid. All children hear the stories. The gods, the flood, Ziusudra, the boat, the return of kingship. These stories are not entertainment alone. They are the shape of the world. At the bottom of society are slaves, prisoners of war, debt slaves, and those born into servitude. Their lives are constrained, often hard, and accepted by the culture as part of the order of things. That acceptance should not make us comfortable. It should remind us that ancient civilization could be brilliant and unjust at the same time. That is one reason this world feels so real. It is not a golden age. It is not a simple nightmare. It is both luminous and heavy. It gives us writing, law, mathematics, architecture, and poetry. It also gives us hierarchy, fear, forced labor, and lives counted like rations on clay. The Anunnaki world after the flood is not gentle, but it is organized. Everywhere, the divine is near. A storm wind is Enlil moving across the land. The deep water is Enki breathing below. Pregnancy belongs to the mother goddess. Disease may be a demon, or a sign that something has gone wrong in the invisible balance. Nothing is fully random. Everything has meaning, which can comfort the heart or burden it, depending on the day. Yet the Sumerians do not seem to cower constantly. They argue with their gods. They plead. They flatter. They remind the gods of past devotion. A man whose life has collapsed does not always say, "I deserve this." Sometimes he says, "I served you. Why have you turned away?" That is deeply human. The relationship is not only obedience. It is negotiation. Smoke rises, and favor descends. But sometimes smoke rises, and nothing comes. Then the prayers become sharper. The laments become longer. The musicians play to soothe a divine heart. The priests search for omens. The city waits. This is the world built after the flood, a world where dread becomes routine, and routine becomes calm. The festival drums fade. The fields darken. Families climb to the roofs. A bowl is washed. A lamp is pinched low. Somewhere, a scribe finishes a tablet and sets it aside to dry. Somewhere, a priest checks that the sacred fire still burns. Somewhere, a child dreams of blue divine eyes passing through a street full of flowers. Above the city, the stars remain patient. Below it, the river moves in the dark. And between river and star, humanity continues the work the gods allowed it to keep, not free from fear, not free from sorrow, but alive, organized, remembering, and still raising smoke into the night. By the later centuries of the Sumerian world, the gods still had houses, meals, songs, and lamps, but something in the old nearness began to thin. It did not happen in one night. No priest woke before dawn, climbed the temple steps, and found a note from heaven saying the gods had gone. Ancient change is usually quieter than that. It gathers like dust in corners. A ritual is performed with the same words, but the answer feels less immediate. A king claims divine favor, but the god no longer seems to stand so close behind him. The temple fire burns. The offerings rise. The tablets are written. Yet the old sense of direct presence begins to fade. That is one of the saddest movements in the story. After the flood, the Anunnaki had returned. They rebuilt, organized, taught, and watched. They lowered kingship. They assigned cities. They gave or guarded the powers of civilization. They accepted the smoke again. For a time, the world seemed held between earth and heaven by visible cords. Then the cords grew harder to see. The cities continued anyway. That matters. Civilizations do not stop just because mystery grows distant. People still need bread. Fields still need water. Children still need names. Debt still needs recording. Walls still need repair. If the gods speak less clearly, the canal does not care. It must be cleared by noon. So the machine keeps moving. In Nippur, priests still wake Enlil. In Ur, the moon god still receives offerings. In Uruk, Inanna still has songs. In Eridu, Enki still belongs to the deep waters. The divine names remain powerful, but the world around them changes. Kings rise with armies. Cities compete. Trade grows. Scribes copy older myths with reverent hands, even as newer powers begin to dominate the land. The Akkadians come. Sargon rises from the north and gathers the city-states into empire. Sumerian cities do not simply vanish. They are absorbed. Their gods are honored in new ways. Their language becomes sacred, learned, prestigious, the way a dead or dying tongue can still command rooms full of scholars. Akkadian becomes common in daily life, but Sumerian remains in hymns, schools, rituals, and old stories. This is another kind of survival. Not the survival of a body on a boat, but the survival of words after the mouth has changed. Imagine a young scribe, centuries later, speaking Akkadian in the street, then sitting in the tablet house to copy Sumerian lines whose sound already belongs to the past. He may not feel the flood as Ziusudra felt it. He may not imagine the Anunnaki as near as his ancestors did. Still, he copies. The reed presses into clay. The old signs remain. After Akkad come other powers. Babylon, Assyria, Persia, Greeks later still. Each age builds over the last. Not always gently. Empires are rarely gentle, even when their scribes have beautiful handwriting. Temples are restored, renamed, plundered, rebuilt, reinterpreted. Gods merge with gods. Local myths become imperial theology. Older divine figures move into the background while newer centers claim the sky. In Babylon, Marduk recess. The Enuma Elish places him at the center of cosmic order. He defeats chaos, arranges the heavens, and gives Babylon its sacred place. The older Anunnaki do not disappear from all memory, but they recede. They become part of an older divine assembly, honored, named, invoked, but no longer always the bright center of the story. This mirrors politics. When cities rise, their gods rise with them. When cities fall, their gods do not always die, but they change rooms in the imagination. A god who once walked the main road may become a figure in the archive, still sacred, but farther away. What happened to the Anunnaki? The tablets do not give us one clean answer. Some traditions imply they withdrew to the heavens, their work complete enough for humanity to continue. Some suggest shifts in divine hierarchy, with younger gods taking power. Alternative theorists offer stranger possibilities, that they returned to a distant world, went underground, or chose to guide humanity from hidden places. Mainstream scholarship sees theological evolution, political change, and mythic memory at work. We cannot know. That uncertainty should not be forced into certainty. It is more honest and more haunting to let it remain open. The important thing is this: the people kept living in the structures the gods were said to have left behind. They kept kingship. They kept law. They kept writing. They kept the measurement of time. They kept temples, offerings, schools, contracts, laments, calendars, and star watching. Even if the gods stepped back, the pattern remained. In a way, that may have been the final test. Not whether humanity could survive under direct supervision, but whether it could continue when the supervisor moved into silence. A child learns first by being watched. Later, the watcher stands farther away. The child still hears the voice in memory. Do this carefully. Do not waste the grain. Close the gate. Speak the words. Count again. Humanity had become that child, older now, still uncertain, still loud, still capable of breaking almost anything, but also capable of building wonders out of mud. The temples remained at the center of life for a long time. Picture an evening in a late Sumerian city. The air is amber with dust. A priest walks through a courtyard that has been repaired so many times no one remembers the first floor. The bricks beneath his feet rest on older bricks, and those on older mud, and under that, perhaps, a flood layer, a thin, dark memory in the earth. He carries a lamp to the inner chamber. He knows the ritual by heart. His father knew it. His teacher knew it. The old text says the god must be honored. So the god is honored. Does he feel Enlil close? Perhaps on some nights, yes. Perhaps on others, he feels only duty. Both can keep a ritual alive. Outside the temple, ordinary people continue their own negotiations with the unseen. A woman prays for a sick child. A merchant promises an offering if a shipment arrives safely. A farmer watches the river rise and calculates whether it will bless or ruin him. A widow places a little food before a household shrine because it is all she has to give. The grand stories speak of gods and kings, but civilization is also made of these small petitions. Help me. Spare this one. Let the field grow. Let the debt be paid. Let the fever pass. Let the roof hold through the night. The Anunnaki, near or distant, remain woven into these requests. Yet time is stronger than any single city. The spoken Sumerian language fades. The scribal tradition preserves it like a flame cupped in two hands. But eventually even that flame thins. Cuneiform continues for centuries in different languages. Tablets are still written in the 1st century of the Common Era. Then, slowly, the wedge-shaped script falls silent. The people who can read it die. The schools close. The signs become marks without voices. That silence lasts a very long time. Over 1,800 years, the tablets lie under earth. Palaces collapse. Libraries burn or are buried. Rain enters rooms where kings once stored records. Wind fills halls with sand. Clay tablets, which had once been ordinary tools of administration, become accidental time capsules. Some are broken. Some are baked hard by fire. Some are left stacked in darkness, waiting without knowing they wait. The cities become mounds. Travelers pass them without understanding. A shepherd may lead goats over the roof of a buried archive. A child may pick up a fragment, see little wedges on it, and toss it aside as a strange stone. The oldest voices on earth have become unreadable. This is another flood, not of water, of forgetting. And then, in the 19th century, the silence begins to break. Archaeologists dig into Mesopotamian mounds. Tablets are carried to museums. Scholars stare at the wedge marks and slowly learn how to hear them again. Names return. Kings return. Flood stories return. Gods who had slept under dust begin to speak in translation. In 1872, George Smith, working at the British Museum, reads a fragment from the Epic of Gilgamesh and realizes that it contains a flood story older than the biblical version. A man warned by a god. A boat. Animals. Birds sent out. A survivor granted a special fate. The discovery shocks the scholarly world. Imagine that room. Not dramatic at first. Shelves. Dust. Broken tablets. A man leaning close to clay under lamplight or gray London light. Then recognition. The past suddenly opens its eye. A story thought to belong to one tradition is revealed to have deeper roots, older roots, Mesopotamian roots. The old flood has spoken again. Smith was deeply moved by the discovery. Reports of his reaction became almost legendary. Whether every detail is true does not matter much here. What matters is that a buried memory crossed thousands of years and struck a modern reader with force. Clay had waited longer than kingdoms. It had outlived the hands that made it, the temples that stored it, the empires that conquered it, and the languages that forgot it. That is why these tablets feel so eerie and so tender. They are fragile, but they survive. They are silent, but they speak. They are only clay, but they carry the beginning of cities, law, kingship, writing, and the flood that almost washed the story away before it could be written. By now, the Anunnaki have become a question more than an answer. Were they gods in the religious sense? Personifications of natural forces and social order? Were they memories of ancient rulers, priests, or culture bringers? Were they, as alternative theories suggest, beings from elsewhere, misunderstood through the language of myth? Were they all of these in different ways, changing as stories passed from city to city? The careful answer is that the tablets belong to myth, theology, and ancient history woven together. The more restless answer is that ancient people may have preserved something they themselves did not fully understand. The sleep story answer is softer. We sit with the question until it becomes a candle rather than a blade. What did they do after the flood? They came back. They found the world quiet. They accepted smoke from the last survivor. They chose management over emptiness. They lowered kingship. They restored cities. They guarded and gave knowledge. They built a system strong enough to continue after their own presence faded. That is the shape of the tale. And now, as the night deepens, we can feel the movement of centuries slowing. The gods withdraw. The tablets sleep. The museums wait. The old clay whispers only when someone learns how to listen. Still, beneath the silence, the river keeps breathing. The story is not finished yet. It only grows quieter. A lump trembles in the archive, and the clay waits without complaint. The old silence has patience. Let us return now to the beginning, because every old story of flood and rebuilding moves in a circle. The museum glass fades. The scholar's room fades. The empires fade, one behind another. Greek, Persian, Assyrian, Babylonian, Akkadian, Sumerian, each name like a lamp carried away down a long corridor. The tablets remain for a moment. Then they too become wet clay in the hands of the first scribes. The wedge marks soften. The reed lifts. The world moves backward through dust, brick, smoke, river breath, and the low murmur of forgotten cities. Back to the flood. Back to the boat. Back to Ziusudra opening the window. The air after rain enters the vessel. It is cold, raw, and full of mud. The people inside do not speak at first. Perhaps they cannot. Words belong to ordinary life, and ordinary life has not yet returned. The animals shift in the dimness, The wooden beams creak. Somewhere, water taps against the side with a small, patient sound. Outside, the world is clean, in the most frightening way. No market voices, no temple drums, no children arguing over scraps of bread, no priest calling the god awake. Only the washed earth, and a silence large enough to hold the end of an age. Ziusudra steps out. His foot sinks into mud. It leaves a print. That print is simple, but it may be the most important image in the whole tale. A human foot pressing into new ground after destruction. A mark saying, "Someone is still here." The offering rises. Smoke moves upward, thin and dark against the pale sky. The gods gather. Hungry, relieved, angered, perhaps uncertain. Enlil sees survival where he expected silence. Enki sees the life he saved. The Anunnaki see the work before them. The flood has not solved the problem of humanity. It has revealed humanity's value. A noisy species, yes, a troublesome one. A species that multiplies, disobeys, complains, breaks tools, miscounts grain, argues at gates, and probably makes the gods regret several design choices before breakfast. But also a species that builds, remembers, offers, learns, returns. That is the strange tenderness in the dark myth. Humanity survives not because it is innocent, and not because it is easy to govern, but because a living world needs hands. Hands to shape clay. Hands to open canals. Hands to lift bread. Hands to press signs into tablets. Hands to rebuild what water has taken. After the flood, the Anunnaki do not simply comfort the survivors. They organize them. They lower kingship from heaven. They place rule in Kish. They remember sacred cities, Eridu, Bad Tibira, Larak, Sipar, Shurupak. They restore temple households. They create hierarchy, administration, ritual, and law. They make sure offerings rise again, not once, but every morning, every evening, through years that become centuries. It is not freedom in the modern sense. It is order. Sometimes stern, sometimes beautiful, sometimes unjust, sometimes brilliant. The rebuilt world is made of contradictions. The same system that teaches writing also counts slaves. The same temples that preserve hymns also gather wealth. The same kings who repair canals also wage war. The same people who imagine divine wisdom in law can accept suffering as part of cosmic design. Ancient civilization is not pure. It never was. But purity is not the reason it matters. It matters because it endured. From the mud after catastrophe came cities with tens of thousands of people. From counting grain came writing capable of poetry. From watching seasons came calendars. From measuring fields came mathematics. From temple ritual came drama, music, law, and historical memory. From the fear of water came walls, records, and stories strong enough to cross millennia. The Anunnaki, whether gods, Symbols, teachers, memories, or something stranger, stand at the center of that imagined beginning. They are the figures who return after destruction. They are the ones credited with rebuilding the frame. They are the powers behind kingship, the guardians of the me, the receivers of smoke, the owners of temples, the distant watchers who eventually step back. And that withdrawal is the final mystery. At first, they seem close. The gods dwell in their houses. Priests wake them, wash them, clothe them, feed them, sing to them, soothe them, and put them to bed beneath the stars. Kings receive authority as if heaven still touches their shoulders. Sages rise from the deep waters with knowledge. The world feels supervised. Then time passes. The gods become less immediate. Their names remain, but their footsteps grow faint. New gods rise. Old cities lose power. Empires speak other languages. The rituals continue, but the original nearness becomes memory. Humanity is left with the system, the tools, the stories, and the question. Did the Anunnaki leave? Or did they only become silent? The tablets do not answer. They end, in a way, with the same quiet that followed the flood. Not empty quiet this time, but waiting quiet. The kind found in museum rooms, where clay sits behind glass and every wedge mark seems both dead and awake. If you stand before such a tablet, you may feel it. The object is small, smaller than the story it carries. Its surface is cracked, its edges broken. It looks humble, almost plain. Yet inside those marks are kings who ruled impossible years, gods who feared their own storm, a survivor who opened a window, and a civilization that believed it had been given a second chance. I have always found that humbling. We think our age is loud, and it is. Screens glow. Cities hum. Machines speak. We send voices through the air and numbers through invisible paths. Yet here we are, still leaning toward clay, still asking what the first cities thought happened after the waters went down. Maybe that is because the flood story is not only about the past. Every civilization fears its own flood. Water may not be the form it takes. It may be fire, war, drought, plague, forgetting, or the slow collapse of trust. But every age knows the feeling that the structures around it are more fragile than they look. Every age wonders what will remain if the waters rise. Every age hopes there will be a window, a survivor, a small offering, and someone willing to rebuild. That is why the Sumerian story still breathes. It tells us that the world began twice. Once in the deep beginning, when gods shaped order from chaos. Again after the flood, when mud received the first human footprint and civilization had to be imagined all over again. The second beginning is the one that feels closest to us. It is not clean. It is not innocent. It is made by tired survivors. People who have lost things. People who count what remains. People who learn to plant again, bake again, pray again, write again. People who carry grief into work because work is the only bridge to morning. The Anunnaki gave, or were remembered as giving, that bridge. They taught agriculture, or received credit for it. They guarded writing, or inspired it. They lowered kingship, or gave mythic shape to political order. They placed the sacred inside the practical, so that a canal gate, a barley ration, a temple lamp, and a line of writing could all belong to the same cosmic structure. Then they stepped back. Maybe because humanity had learned enough. Maybe because the gods were never meant to remain so near. Maybe because stories change as cities change. Or maybe because the silence itself was the final lesson. A child cannot grow if the teacher never leaves the room. So the gods withdraw. Humanity continues. It makes empires, poems, mistakes, laws, vars, songs, measurements, prayers, and museums. It forgets the script, then learns it again. It buries the tablets, then lifts them carefully from the dust. It asks the old question in new languages. Who made us? Why were we saved? Who taught us to build? And if the ones who came after the flood once watched us from the high terraces of Sumer, what would they think of what we became? The story does not answer, and perhaps it should not. A complete answer would close the door too firmly. The half-open door is what lets the night air in, so let the question remain. Let it sit beside the candle. Let it rest in the same room as the old clay, the river mud, the reed stylus, the smoke, the boat, and the first rebuilt city. The fire is low now. Outside, the imagined rivers move under moonlight. The ziggurat stands in darkness, its steps cooled by night. The temple lamp burns behind a curtain. A scribe sleeps with clay dust under his nails. A farmer dreams of water entering the furrows at the right time. A child dreams of a boat on a wide brown sea. Far away in time, behind museum glass, the tablets wait. They do not shout. They do not explain everything. They simply hold the memory. The flood came. The world fell silent. The gods returned. Humanity was spared, managed, taught, and left to continue. And we did continue. That may be the most remarkable part of all. We continued through mud, hunger, ampere, fire, translation, forgetting, and rediscovery. We continued long enough to read the marks again. Long enough to sit in the dark and ask what the Anunnaki did after the flood. Long enough to feel the old question touch us gently, not as fear now, but as stillness. The story has come back to water. Not raging water. Still water. Sediment settling at the bottom of a jar. Breath slowing in a quiet room. A candle sinking into its own small pool of wax. The kind of water that remembers the storm without becoming it again. Before sleep takes the last edge of the room, stay once more with that single footprint in the mud. It is not heroic in the way statues are heroic. It is not polished, not crowned, not carved from stone. It is only a pressure mark, a small hollow left by weight. Yet every city that followed seems to rise from it. Every law tablet Every schoolroom, every canal, every temple meal, every clock that still counts time in 60s, all of it feels like a widening circle around that one human step. Perhaps that is why the story soothes even while it darkens. It admits that worlds can break. It does not pretend the waters are harmless. But it also says that after the breaking, someone may still open a window. Someone may still make a fire on wet ground. Someone may still place one brick on another and begin the patient work again. That is enough for tonight. More than enough for the tired heart to rest. Rest there. Let the ancient cities grow distant. Let Eridu sink softly into mist. Let Kish close its gates. Let Nippur lower its lamps. Let Shurapak keep the memory of the boat. Let the gods, whatever they were, step back into the deep. The clay has spoken for tonight. The smoke has risen. The world has been rebuilt again in words. Gently, slowly, one image at a time. And now the questions can wait. The river can wait. History can wait. Good night.